Now we're going to turn to the other side of things, the scientific evidence of a creator, of God. What would we look for if we were looking into the scientific realm to see evidence of God? Because we're not going to find empirical evidence like we're going to see him standing there somewhere, or even in most cases hear the audible voice of God. So what would be the evidence in science that would confirm there is a creator? We would look for two different things. We would look, first of all, for design features, because design features always point to a designer. Like if you see a building built, you know there was a blueprint and somebody designed the building, and the builder went by the blueprints, and therefore you have an organized building. It certainly didn't come about as the result of an explosion in a lumber yard somewhere. Also, if you look at a 747 flying by in the sky, we look at that and we know instinctively that someone with wisdom and understanding designed it, because we see design features within the structure. Also, we would look for information, because information always points to a source of intelligence. Information, especially that's organized and usable, always comes from some source of intelligence. So when we look through the known world and we look at scientific evidence, if we can find design features and usable information that's ordered and accomplishing things, we certainly would find evidence of a designer and of a source of intelligence, a person, the Lord God, who the Bible talks about as creator of all things. So I want to give you an outline regarding these things. And it's pretty easy to remember, from biggest to smallest. Now, technically, the smallest thing we're going to talk about is probably not the smallest thing. There are particles that are even smaller, but we're going to get pretty small. We're going to get to the DNA within the nucleus of the human cell. So we're going to start with the biggest thing, the universe, and then look at progressively smaller things. The universe, the solar system, the earth, living creatures on the earth, the human body, the microscopic world, the human cell, and then the DNA within the nucleus of the human cell. And in all of those different levels, we will find that there is order, design, and in the last one that we'll look at, we'll see tremendous amounts of usable information that's involved in ordering and bringing about life. And so as we look into the scientific realm, we'll see evidence of a creator. So let's start with the biggest thing, the universe. Did you know that the universe, scientists now tell us, is finely tuned so that life can exist? That's right. There's over 30 laws of physics, are called physical constants, that are involved in the way the universe functions. Things like the force of gravity, the speed of light, the cosmological constant, and all of these different over 30 physical constants that are involved with the laws of physics are precisely set, very, very precisely set in order for life to exist. It's really astounding when you begin to look at it and understand just how clearly these things had to have been set in this way in order for life to come about anywhere in the universe. Well, it's not a surprise, because Psalm 19:1 says the heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. And so it's not a surprise we would see things that point to God in the heavens above us. Now, when we look at this fine-tuning of the universe, if you look in the right-hand corner of the picture you're seeing there, you'll see the equation, the mathematical equation for the force of gravity. All of these other physical constants, like Hubble's constant and Planck's constant and the charge on protons, the cosmological constant, and such, each of them has a mathematical formulation that shows exactly how they're set. Now, the amazing thing is this, is that science now knows that if you move it just a touch one way or the other, you would not have life, you would not have galaxies or solar systems or planets or stars that would be able to be existing in the universe. So here's another picture that shows you just how precise it is. It's really kind of mind-boggling. Here we see the ratio of electrons to protons, the maximum deviation, 1 to 10 to the 37th power. The ratio of electromagnetic force to gravity, 1 to 10 to the 40th power. The expansion rate of the universe, 1 to 10 to the 55th power. The mass density of the universe, 1 to 10 to the 59th power. And the cosmological constant, 1 to 10 to the 120th power. These are incredible numbers that are just way beyond our understanding, saying that that's how precise these things are. You could only move it within that tiny bit in order for it not to totally throw off the way the universe functions. Well, what's the explanation for this? We would see that the evolutionists say, well, the only explanation they've come up with is the multiverse theory that says that, well, maybe it truly is finely tuned, but maybe that's because there's been millions and millions of universes, like some machine has been producing universes over the billions of years, and this one just happened to come out perfect. Now, that is truly what they say. It's hard to believe. The obvious, when anybody with common sense just looking at it with an honest heart would say it looks designed. And many well-known scientists have acknowledged just as much. There's something called the anthropic principle that exists, that many scientists have said that the universe appears to have been created for the purpose of man, as it looked so ordered and designed. Now, all of these things point to a wonderful creator. And just a side note here, up in the heavens, we see something amazing that the Hubble spacecraft photographs have sent back to us, and it's a picture of the Whirlpool galaxy. And if you look in the center of that galaxy, you will see a clear picture of the cross. I wonder if God is just wanting to say to us, a reminder, even as we look into the vastness of space, that he loves us and he's with us. He sent his son to die for us on the cross. What a beautiful picture that reminds us of his existence. Now, if you want to learn more about the fine-tuning of the universe, I'm going to include within the packet of material you'll receive a paper that has these different sources that will help you to learn more. You can go much deeper on each of these areas than what I'm covering today. Now, the next one, as we start to move a little bit smaller, is the solar system, our own solar system. Now, it's so ordered that if we wanted to, we could find out, we could say, we know exactly where each planet will be in its orbit around the sun 100 years from now on this date at this moment, because it's perfectly ordered. Also, we see so many different the different planets are made of different materials. They rotate in various different directions. None of it looks like the result of a random explosion, but rather it looks ordered and designed. And even the relationship to the Earth to the moon. The moon is the perfect size and the perfect distance from the Earth to control the tides, to control the tilt of the Earth, and even to create eclipses, because the size of the sun in relationship to its how far it is from the Earth is an exact ratio with the moon and its size related to its distance from the Earth, so that we get wonderful eclipses and are able to study the sun and other parts of the universe. And so it's just the design features are so wonderful. Again, you can learn more about the solar system with various sources that we're including in this material. The Earth itself, as we move smaller, the Earth is a wonderful place. Now, what most of us have not known is that there are over 75 different parameters that are needed in order for a planet to be able to support life. And yet, when we look at the Earth and we understand that there's so many different features, its distance from the sun, orbiting around the right type of star, having the right type of atmosphere, the right amount of liquid water, and on and on and on. Over 75 different things that have to be perfectly in place. And yet the Earth, though some want to say it's just one of many planets probably out there somewhere where life exists, the reality is what we find is the Earth is a very unique place, designed, as God said in Isaiah 45:18, as a place that he created and designed not to be a waste place, but to be inhabited. and we see it has all the characteristics necessary, all the design features necessary in order for it to be inhabited. Well, what are the chances of all of these parameters being in place for the earth to be able to inhabit life? Well, some scientists have tried to calculate it, and it's 1 in 1 quadrillion. One chance out of a quadrillion that the earth would have all of these features that it has in order for life to exist here. Again, it looks designed. Now, many will still throw that evidence out and say, well, it can't be God because we believe in naturalism, and so the only plausible answers has to be found within nature. But if we don't limit ourselves to naturalism, the obvious conclusion is that God has created and designed these things and put his stamp upon them, so wonderfully designed. Now, let's look at a few other features of the earth, of special things here on the earth. One is, think of the watering system, the transfer of moisture throughout the earth. Now, we know that part of that is the oceans, that water evaporates from the oceans and it accumulates in the skies above, and then it's moved by the upper winds, and clouds form as the water molecules can begin to condense in the colder air, and storms form, and water is poured back on the earth, and this is a wonderful watering system. But as I was studying this, actually just a few months ago, I noticed a word referred to in a graph that I'm showing you even now on the screen about the watering system of the earth. The word was transpiration. And I thought, what in the world is transpiration? And so I began to study it and found that not only does this watering system work by just the runoff of water from rains back into the oceans, but the plants themselves play a major role in keeping this watering system going. Let me give you an example, just of one of many, of how trees, they bring the water up through the root system, and it's a complex system. You can look at the design features of the tree, of the different parts that cause this to happen, but it draws the water up to the very tops of the trees and to the leaves, and then all the water, after it's been used within the tree to nurture it and to bring life to the tree, is evaporated back into or transpired, like we would perspire and sweat. The trees sweat as well. Moisture back into the atmosphere. And here's an example. A maple tree on a hot day in the summer can transpire or bring back into the atmosphere 50 to 60 gallons of water per hour. Isn't that amazing? Think of all the trees around us, and even cornfields and other types of plants are constantly replenishing the moisture within the atmosphere so that life can exist here on the earth. Then we look at seeds and soil and how life comes forth from amazing little seeds like the one in this person's hand. These tiny little seeds, we might look at them and say, well, truly, these seeds are so small. It must be a pretty small plant that's going to come forth from these seeds. Well, here's the plant that comes about from those seeds. It's a sequoia tree. And we see the life that emerges from tiny seeds placed within the soil, and we see amazing life forms that come forth. Well, also there's a perfect balance within our atmosphere here on earth. You may wonder, how is it that we can breathe in oxygen continually, day after day, moment after moment, billions of people all around the world, also the animals breathing in oxygen continually, and we're breathing out carbon dioxide, continually filling the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. Well, what is it that keeps us from very quickly absorbing all the oxygen out of the atmosphere and then everybody dying? Well, it's the fact that the plants, the trees, and all the plant life around the earth do the very opposite. They breathe in carbon dioxide in order to live, and they breathe out oxygen into the atmosphere, replenishing the oxygen so that there's this perfect balance. Now, we can look at all of those kinds of things, and certainly an evolutionist will say it's all just accident, it's all just random chance has caused it to occur, and we're just the beneficiaries of random chance. Well, we can't absolutely prove that it didn't happen randomly, but the better answer when we're just using common sense is that it looks designed, that it points scientifically to a person who has made it that way on purpose so that life can exist. Now we move to the next level, and that is we're getting smaller here. We're looking now at living creatures here on the earth. Everywhere you look throughout the earth at different types of living creatures, you will find amazing design features. I want to give you just a few. The first one is a little bird that's called the Australian brush turkey. Now, this little bird is amazing in that his nest is not like most birds. It's not up in a tree, but it's a mound that can be 3 to 6 feet tall and 12 to 15 feet wide. Now, the amazing thing is the female brush turkey will lay the eggs and place them underneath the mound. But for 7 weeks, the male brush turkey, the papa, has to control the temperature and the humidity levels within that mound at a very precise level in order for the eggs to be able to eventually hatch and little brush turkeys come forth. He has to keep that mound at about 91 degrees Fahrenheit, within a degree or two, for 7 weeks outside. He does that by moving and removing sticks and leaves and sand and such. And somehow he is able to instinctively know how to keep the temperature and humidity levels at perfect levels inside of that mound. Well, who taught the brush turkey how to do that? If he had to evolve that ability, brush turkeys would have been extinct long before they would have had the ability to evolve such amazing characteristics. Here's another thing. It's something so small as an ear mite, and not just the type of ear mites that go in the ears of dogs or cats, but this is a particular type of ear mite that lives in the ear of a moth. And here's the amazing thing. Ear mites will infest an ear of the moth, and when they do, they set up their colony there, have their babies there and such, and when they do, that moth will go deaf in that ear. Well, if the moth goes deaf in both ears, it's a sitting duck for a bat or for another predator to get it and eat it, and so both the ear mites and the moth are in big trouble. Well, here's the amazing thing, and how in the world could evolution ever explain this? Ear mites, these tiny little ear mites, will never infest both ears of a moth. Sometimes they'll infest the left ear, sometimes they'll infest the right ear, but they will never infest both ears, so the moth is still able to hear. There is no natural explanation for that, but it's a beautiful picture of how a sovereign, supernatural God has created all things around us. I love to talk about the monarch butterfly. Monarch butterflies, they are beautiful, obviously, and the whole process of just a butterfly becoming a butterfly in itself is amazing. But I want to talk distinctly about the monarch and its relationship to the United States and North America. Monarchs, the bulk of them, they hibernate over the winter in a certain area of trees, a forest area, in quite a bit in the southern part, actually central to southern part of Mexico. And in the spring, when they come back to activity, they begin to move north as milkweeds begin to grow in northern Mexico and up into Texas, because they only lay their eggs on milkweed plants and they eat milkweed plants. And so this generation will lay their eggs and then they die. And these little caterpillars will come out, they'll eat the milkweed, they become caterpillars or they become butterflies, and then they take off and they begin to fly north, where now milkweeds are growing as it's getting closer to summer, and they're moving up into the more central part of the United States, and they live 6 to 8 weeks, lay their eggs, and they die. And so then that generation does the same process, and they move up a little farther north, live 6 to 8 weeks, and they die. And the next generation lives 6 to 8 weeks, and now they've laid their eggs up in southern Canada and the northern part of the United States. They're now 1,500 to 2,000 miles or so from where these forests exist in southern Mexico. So what is going to happen now if this generation has 6 to 8 weeks to live and they don't know their way south, how to get back there where they came from or where their predecessors came from? The amazing thing is that generation of monarch butterflies will migrate from southern Canada and from the northern parts of the United States back to the very same trees that their great-great-great-grandma and grandpa spent the winter in last winter. The very same place. Some of them will actually migrate across the Gulf of Mexico. And think about this. That generation of monarchs lived about 8 months. What is the explanation? How can this possibly happen unless there is a creator who's designed them to bring glory and honor to him? Think about the honeybee. First of all, they're wonderful architects. They're able to create. Men have tried to use the design features of the honeycomb because it's the strongest form of architecture that they know in order to use it in various forms of architecture. But the honeybee does it without anyone teaching him how to make the honeycomb perfectly. Now, also the honeybee communicates about food sources in a very unique way to other bees. When he finds a food source in some flowers or plants or whatever the food source may be, and maybe it's a half a mile or a mile from the hive, he travels back and he enters the hive and he begins to communicate to all of the other bees about this food source by first of all giving them a little taste of the food that he's brought back, but then he begins to do a dance in the middle of all of them. And based on the direction of the dance, how strong he's vibrating his tail, and different features of the dance, he's communicating the direction of the food source, the type of the food source, the quality of the food source, and within a half hour or so, bees will begin to come in great numbers to that very food source. How do honeybees do that? What a wonderful example of a beautiful creator who's just shown himself in wonderful ways through living creatures all around us. You can learn more about these things as well in some wonderful resources that we're pointing you toward. Well, now we move from living creatures to the human body. The human body, the Bible says in Psalm 139, we were formed and fashioned in our mother's womb by God. Well, when we look at the human body, we see so many different design features. First of all, in the process by which a baby is developed in the womb, there's miracle after miracle after miracle. And you can study these things and find out that the whole process is just staggering with the amount of detail that's involved of processes in order for, just think of this, for one cell to multiply into trillions and trillions of cells and then diversifying into various types of cells, all in 9 months, without somebody humanly there in the womb accomplishing that, but God there in the womb bringing about this great miracle. Now, the human body, when we look at how and the anatomy of the human body, we see all these different systems. The circulatory system, the nervous system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the skeletal system, the muscular system. When we look at all of these different systems, we see in every one of them, if we had time, we could look at each one in detail and find that they are amazingly designed, that they are very intricate. They fit together so wonderfully and have even little details about them that we would just marvel at the more we study them. And then we look at various organs of the human body, like the human heart. Did you know that the heart in an average person that lives around 70 years will pump enough blood to fill train cars, a train 25 miles long? That much blood pumped in the lifetime of a human being. If you stretched out all of the blood vessels of your body end to end, it would stretch about 60,000 miles, 2.5 times around the earth. How amazing is that? If you look into the lungs, you see these little sacs called alveoli, and there's estimated 300,000 to 500, 300 million to 500 million alveoli in each of the lungs. And within these tiny little sacs and the capillaries around them is this wonderful ability for the lung to be able to transfer with every breath oxygen into the blood system and take out the carbon dioxide that's left over as residue and to exhale it out of the body. This process happening every moment, every breath you take, because of a wonderfully designed body. Did you know that your brain, they now say that it's estimated that your brain can store more information, now get ready for this, than the entire worldwide internet web. That's amazing, isn't it? That the capabilities of the human brain that God has placed there and created, there's nothing like it on the earth. And we look at the human body, and again, we see evidence of a designer. We could talk more and more about that. But let's move into now the microscopic world. Even in the tiny microscopic world, we see beautiful design features. Think about the bacterial flagellum. Now, what is that? Well, that's the flagella is the little tail in the backside of the bacteria, which is a single-celled organism. Now, it's that little tail that rotates like a rotary motor that allows the bacteria to move about. It travels it rotates at an amazing speed, and it can reverse directions almost instantaneously. And scientists now have found that there are over 40 distinct parts working together, just like in the development of a rotary motor, where you have various parts, a stator and a rotor and such. All of these distinct parts working together for this single-celled creature that you need a powerful microscope to even see it. It's so small, and yet you see amazing design features within the ability of the bacteria to be able to move about. And so even in the microscopic world, we see wonderful design features. And in the microscopic world, we come to the next level, and that is the human cell itself. A 747 has approximately 5 million different parts working together for it to be able to function. Did you know the human cell has over billions of parts working together? Each cell, each human cell, then you have about 100 trillion of them, has manufacturing plants, power plants, transportation systems, a postal system, a quality control system, security systems, communication systems, etc., etc. The human cell is like a miniature city. I like to call it 100 trillion reasons to believe in God. Because when you study the human cell, you see undeniable design features of a wonderful creator. Let's talk just a little bit about some of the functions within the cell. How efficient are these parts working together? What is happening within the cell that allows for life to occur? Well, one of the major things that's happening is the production of proteins. It's estimated that the human cell will produce, the average human cell produces about 2,000 proteins per second. Think about the function of the cell, how amazing it is in just one aspect that we'll talk about now. The production of proteins. It's estimated that on average, your cells produce about 2,000 proteins per second. Now, remember, you have about 100 trillion cells, so 100 trillion times 2,000 per second. Now, this process, you might think, well, if there's that much of it happening, it must be a very simple process for a protein to be produced. Well, let's look at that process together. The process of producing a protein within the cell starts in the nucleus of the cell, where the DNA is. And it begins by the unraveling with a section of DNA called a gene. Conveniently, each gene has a start sign and a stop sign so that the RNA polymerase, the organelle that is accomplishing this, knows when to start and when to stop. So this RNA polymerase, it unfolds this portion of the gene and it creates a copy of it. And this transcription produces an RNA messenger molecule, which is a copy of that gene. And so now, once it's produced, the RNA messenger molecule has to get back out of the nucleus of the cell. It has to be let out into the outer portion of the cell through the gatekeepers of the nucleus called the pores. Once it's outside, this new RNA molecule is combined to a ribosome. A ribosome is an organelle where the translation takes place. The translation of the DNA or the RNA language into the language of amino acids. It's here in the ribosome where now a string of amino acids, normally, depending on the protein, but normally hundreds of amino acids long, have to be produced in exactly the right order. And so now when we finish with the ribosome, we have a string of amino acids, hundreds long, and yet it's still not a protein. It's then chaperoned into a barrel-shaped organelle where it is folded into a protein. It has to be folded perfectly upon itself in order for a protein to be produced. Now, once it's folded properly in this barrel-shaped organelle, we now have one protein. But it still is not done, the process, because it has to get to where it needs to go and be used for its proper purpose. And so now it's chaperoned into what is called the Golgi apparatus, which is like the post office of the cell. It's where it will be marked and placed with other like proteins in sacs called vesicles, and marked what these proteins are and where they need to go and what their use will be. And once they're packaged in vesicles, my favorite part of the whole process takes place. And that is, has to be carried to the proper place. And so there are these motor proteins called kinesin. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a body or a trunk. And they literally pick up the sacs, the vesicles of proteins, and they carry them on the microtubules, which is like the highway system of the cell, and deliver them to the proper place in the cell. Now just think about it. Right now, in this moment, you have hundreds of trillions of these little guys walking around inside of your body, carrying bags of proteins in order for you to be able to live. And you don't even have to think about it. What an amazing process. And this shows us, right within the human cell, the amazing amount of design that is there, that screams at us of a wonderful creator and designer. Now, it takes a lot of energy for all of this to take place, and that brings us to the energy production within the cell, which in itself is amazing. And I want to show you another clip and talk about it for a moment. The power plants or the energy plants of the cell are called mitochondria. And they have a membrane fold that is full of these ATP synthase rotary machines within the folds of the membrane. These rotary machines rotate, and within each rotation, they're taking in ADP molecules, which is just has 2 phosphates, and they're creating an ATP molecule, which has 3 phosphates, which is now like a charged battery. It's like taking uncharged batteries and charging them up. 1,000 RPMs per second or per minute. And we see that this is producing an estimated 10 million ATP molecules that are like recharged batteries per second in each of the cells of your body. An amazing process that's going on. And these are just a few examples of what we find within the human cell that points to a designer, a creator. Now, the final state or area that we're going to look at is that of the DNA that's found inside the nucleus of the cell. DNA is such an amazing information system. It's the most densely packed information system known. The amount of information found in 1 gram of DNA is equivalent to the amount of information found in 1 trillion CDs. Just think about that. Bill Gates has said that DNA is like a computer software program, only much more complex than any software programs we've ever been able to produce. Watch this little video and learn more about what's involved with DNA and its information system.
If simple water molecules that form ice crystals exhibit magnificent structure, consider the design ingenuity behind large, complex molecules, such as DNA. DNA contains the blueprint for all life and is by far the densest information storage mechanism known in the universe. For example, the amount of information contained in a pinhead volume of DNA would fill a stack of books 500 times higher than from here to the moon. The program code and design of such an incredible system indicates a supremely intelligent designer.
The evidence to me that just cries out that there's a God is the study of DNA. DNA is a very powerful, massive information storage system. In fact, DNA that makes up our genes actually is like books of information that's read by a language system. It's absolutely phenomenal. And scientists know today that languages, a code, only come from an intelligence, and information only comes from information. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to a code. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to information. And as you look at DNA, it actually cries out, in the beginning, God created the universe.
We all begin as a single cell the size of a period at the end of a sentence. How does that cell know how to build a body with 100 trillion cells in it, thousands of different kinds, and each one of them is so complex, nanochemical machinery beyond our comprehension how it works, and encoded is the instruction manual. It's the manufacturer's manual how to build and operate every part of this incredible body made up of 100 trillion cells.
Furthermore, DNA is a three-dimensional molecule that is self-replicating. Each molecule is able to make an identical copy quickly and efficiently. The Lord has even programmed DNA to detect and correct replication errors. These sophisticated capabilities far exceed man's means.
God has created the DNA molecule in such a way that it is self-correcting. There are special proteins called enzymes that go up and down the DNA molecule looking for and making repairs on a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis. God created us with a DNA code that actually has what we call editase or editorial type enzymes. Just as an editor reads a newspaper or a book looking for mistakes, so God has created special enzymes that go up and down our DNA molecule, repairing the mistakes in ways that are unbelievably complex.
There are many examples in creation of things that demonstrate the biblical God. One would be in our very DNA. Our DNA has information in it. And there is a whole field of scientific study called information science, which studies how information originates, how it's transmitted, and so on. And one of the laws of information science says that information never originates by itself in matter, never spontaneously comes about. Anytime we trace the copying of information back to its source, it always comes back to a mind. And since we have creative information in DNA, that tells me that DNA comes from intelligence. It's not something that could possibly come about through millions of years of mutations and natural selection. That just won't work.
Yet even the DNA molecule is simple compared to cells. All life consists of cells, and each cell functions as a miniature city. When we consider that a human body consists of trillions of cells working together as one unit, we should be in humble awe of our Creator's intimate care and perfect wisdom.
So within DNA, we see this vast amount of organized, usable information that points clearly to a source of intelligence. Let me illustrate how this works for a moment by talking with you for a second about, just imagine with me that you and I are walking along a shoreline. And in the sand in front of us, we see these three words written: I love you. Now, we weren't there to see how they got there, but both of us, along with every other person that on the face of the earth that they saw those words, we would all agree someone with intelligence has been here. Someone purposely wrote those words. How could we know that it didn't happen by just the waves causing the sand, grains of sand to move in that direction? We would know because those three words communicate a message. It's organized information that's usable, can communicate something. DNA is very usable information that communicates to the organelles exactly how to function and what proteins to produce. It's very complex information. And when you and I look at those words on the sand, in the sand, we would say someone has communicated. And in this case, a wonderful message that says, I love you. When we look at DNA, each one of us should see that God has communicated to us not only evidence of his wonderful intelligence, but he's really, in a sense, saying to each of us, I love you. And so, when we look at all of this evidence, from the biggest thing to the smallest thing, from the universe itself to the DNA in the nucleus of the cell, we see evidence of a designer, of a source of intelligence, of a person who created us and made us in his image and likeness. And so we as believers don't have to think, well, we have no evidence to back our faith, that we're believing in God by blind faith. As a matter of fact, it's really the opposite of what is sometimes said in the world. All of the evidence points to a designer, points to a wonderful creator. And so we look at these different things, and I want to encourage you again to take these flashcards that you have and memorize these points. Think of biggest to smallest. You can remember that. You can memorize this and have, you certainly may have to go back over the video or go back over the materials at some point. You may want to dive into other materials, and many of them we've listed for you along the way that will give you more information. But here's a starting point for you. 6 flaws of the theory of evolution. And then about 8 different levels: universe, solar system, the earth, living creatures on the earth, the human body, the microscopic world, the human cell, and the DNA in the nucleus of the cell. And so you can memorize those things and say, at every level I see scientific evidence that confirms that we are created and made by God. I hope that you will use this information. I hope that you will be better equipped and that you will come forth like David did when he was facing Goliath in ancient times. And somebody had to come and face this intimidating person who was in front of them, just like the intimidating spirit that's in our world today that says to the church, you better just keep inside the walls of the church. You better not mess with us because we've got all the evidence on our side. And they'll mock us and they'll say that we believe what we believe by blind faith. But we need to rise up like David did. He was armed, and we need to be armed with the information that we've talked about today. He had faith and courage, and we need to have faith and courage that whenever we move forth to speak forth God's truth, the Holy Spirit of God who lives within us will speak through us and be with us in those moments. He trusted God. He ran to the battle. And it's time for the church to rise up and say, no longer will we let our children and our grandchildren be stolen by those that are lying to them and saying that there's no evidence to confirm the Christian faith. But rather, we can begin to help other people who have been confused and blinded by the things of this world. I hope that you will remember what 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 says. Always be ready to give a defense to those who ask about the hope within you. I hope that you'll use this material and grow closer to the Lord. Be strengthened in your own faith, and then let God use you to minister to others. I hope you'll use this material in your church and encourage others to watch this video with you and go back over it again. If you need more information or you'd like to contact me about speaking or any other issues, there's going to be contact information at the very end. Anything I can do to be of help to you, let me know. God bless you. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.